Good afternoon. Thank you for having me here. And now it's getting a bit boring. It's about legislation. Maybe normally I don't talk about me so much, but maybe saying a little bit of some of us here know each other for decades, I would say. I'm happy to see so many young faces here because, sorry for you, you have to take on. We thought at one point it should be all solved and we talk about other things, but it's just continuing. And I started my career in the year of Chernobyl in the Hamburg administration when we had more than 70% of our power supply coming from the surrounding nuclear power plants. And since then, the subject has never really left my desk and my mind, and so here I am again. Maybe as a sort of introduction, I want to say a little bit what's in my head at the moment. EU member states with old nuclear face, in my view, a tsunami of financial risks to stand by their ailing companies and to ensure safe decommissioning and storage. And I think there are some things we haven't touched upon yet, but which we should look at in parallel in many ways. If we want to have a real pathway towards sustainable energy in the future, we need to have clarity in legal and economic rules on the risks and responsibilities. We need to have open information with full involvement of national and European Parliament and stakeholders. I think, and I'm sorry that the colleague from Germany is not there, but I think the recent Commission and its work in Germany could be a model to find a societal consensus to shoulder things the society should not shoulder in the first place. I come back to that. Open access to the full subsidy schemes involved, including pairing with other aid scrutiny for the companies involved. And now I come to something maybe people would say, what has that to do with this? And that is we need clear, continued priority access in dispatch and continued progressive national renewable energy targets and policies. There has to be, in the same time, when we try to get hold of the dilemma, there has to be maintenance of renewable comes first approach. And that's for me not something nice, because I come back to the legal obligation to internalize externalities, and we are running up a chronicle non-internalization. So at least for the sake of fair play, we should not spit on the renewables that they have to face a market which is not existing. And since we have Brexit coming, we should also think about using really the time when the UK also has to leave Euratom, which is the case. I heard voices within the Commission that they say, no, wait a minute, they can leave the treaties, but they can remain in Euratom. But that would put the whole philosophy from the past upside down when Sweden, Austria, Finland, and so forth were asked to sign to all three treaties when entering, and so forth. So there should be good use of the Brexit pathway to really come to terms again with Euratom. I give a bouquet to Joe, but when I mean that, I mean I give a bouquet to our distinguished members of Parliament, but I give a bouquet to Joe Leinen in his old role he had once as Minister of Environment in the Saarland, because that was one of the first steps when I talk about legal security of citizens, that the Saarland at that time, together with Luxembourg, dared to question the legality of some issues around the Cattenom nuclear plant, and it was their initiative which led to one of the first ECJ court cases where the European Court of Justice issued a judgment based on Euratom, and it said that France has not respected the consultation procedure towards the Commission in view of its neighbors under Article 37 of Euratom. And I think these were the first steps of courage, which is now repeated. I have the pleasure to work for two German regions concerning the prolongation of the nuclear power plants, Dole 1 and 2 and Tihange 1 in Belgium, on the question of extension of lifetime without environmental impact assessment. And in a way, Joe had opened that pathway also. The reminder, as a lawyer, the polluter pays principle. No, it had been touched upon, and we all know that it is part of the European legal framework, as we see in Article 191 of the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union. So I come to something where the colleagues from the Cour des Comptes will touch upon in detail on the newest report. But when I, as a non-scientific person in engineering, looks at this graph, we do face something like, in the next decades, more like 200 reactors which needs decommissioning. The UK, we heard about the Commission's estimate. So now I come to what one would say the first address to look into when looking in any legal grounds for how to come to cope with financing of decommissioning, and that's Euratom. But Euratom is completely silent on construction and on decommissioning, and thus on financing for decommissioning. And then there is an interesting pathway which is not a clear one either. We do have several council regulations on decommissioning, but they are partly based on a specific, I would say, catch basin article for events where no necessary legal power has been provided for by Euratom. And it's Article 203 of Euratom. And that means if action by the community should prove necessary to attain, and that's very important to digest, one of the objectives of the community, meaning Euratom, and this treaty has not provided the necessary powers, the Council shall, acting unanimously on a proposal from the Commission and consultation of the Parliament, take the appropriate steps. So the European decommissioning is there a blueprint? We learn a lot, as has been said by the Deputy Director General, from the current decommissioning work in Bulgaria, Lithuania, and Slovakia, where the end of decommissioning is foreseen. The most recent would be for Bohunice in 2025. When I come to these regulations, the legislative text based on 203, Euratom, naturally that had its story in the accession negotiations with these countries, and where we as Europe, and I think rightly and properly so, provided financial assistance programs, and you can see how much is already paid only until 2013. And I leave the review by the Court of Auditors to where it belongs to. Is Article 203 now, let's say, a breeding ground for a EU-wide decommissioning financing regulation? And that I have my doubts. The scope is not meant to be that, because it says which are the objectives belonging to the objectives of Euratom. But when the objectives do not talk about decommissioning and not even putting into service, so there is no, it's a void. So for that, in that respect, I have looked into two council regulations, and I was, even in my old age, I was a little bit astonished. There is the council regulation on union support for decommissioning programs in Bulgaria and Slovakia, which is repealing an older one because it's necessary because of the financial terms ahead. There the legal basis, Article 203, which I think is a questionable basis. But then, more importantly, on the same day is a council regulation of the 13th December on union support for decommissioning Lithuania, and there the legal basis is the Accession Act, and in particularly some articles and protocols, one protocol of the Accession Act. And that's something very strange, that you can give a regulation of the Council which is not rooted in European treaty law, but which is rooted in an accession treaty, which was open to the vote in the parliaments of the acceding countries. And that's a phenomenal misunderstanding here. I think they are both, we should look into that if they both stand on grounds which are good. I looked into the protocol on Ignalina, and there we do have something interesting, which I just say, for the sake of that was a good protocol, because the protocol is fair enough to say, whatever we give here, it shall be compatible with the internal market rules as defined in the EC Treaty on 2 occasions, and public aid should be seen on a case-by-case basis. So we have a legal dilemma in Europe. We have no clarity, and we have no legal rule in any decommissioning regulation and decision so far. I also wonder why then there is a protocol number 9, and for Bohunice and in Slovakia. Why then didn't the Council use then also the accession treaty and that protocol? So in itself, it's just not doing what they want or what they can't believe. And then also the question of the budget. I think we need another day for that, but we must look where is the budget parked for the current dismantling support we give, and is that the real docking station? So there is no way to interpret, in my view, again, a new competence into Euratom. How much want to stretch that it fits your purpose? It's just, you have a treaty, and the treaty has an objective, full stop. And if that objective, then at least do a new convention and enlarge the objectives, or whatever you do, but you cannot just with secondary law do whatever you like to cook up a story. So there is no clear ground. So the principle should remain that a member state who decides to go nuclear in the past, who decided he should the first one to be called in for organizing and financing the dismantling pathway, and he has to find the legal basis. We could have a legal basis. We could have a European action, and that is our treaty, but that's not Euratom. And I define here some objectives. As I said before, we have a fantastic Article 191, and we have Article 194 on energy policy, and with the combination of that, we have, for transboundary effects, we have our international treaties. So it's not that we are naked, yeah, but it's not Euratom. And then still very fast to the decommissioning. I think the Commission is doing what she can on finding some grounds and clarity. They have this current study underway on decommissioning assistance. I had already the pleasure to work on a project for the Commission way in 2006 and 2007, where we compared different fund methodologies. So I would not blame the European Commission for sitting idle. That would be unfair, and that's not what I want, just the contrary. The patchwork, I would just briefly look, because we do have Eve later, but at least for Germany, we have the Rückstellungspraxis, so we had a very weird system in Germany. As you know, we didn't put the money in the funds, but in a specific fund, but left it in the balance of the companies, and they went shopping. You all know that the former battles are over. Now we find out that money which was put aside in bad business, or it was not enough. So in a way, it's the same story we heard already so often. The German nuclear power plants are to be decommissioned by the end of 2022 and dismantled. According to the Atomic Energy Act, the operators must bear all the costs of dismantling and disposing of radioactive waste. And then we heard that the energy utilities had built up approximately, as Paul said, a little bit over 38 billion euro. The federal government, I think, being German, I can say, did quite some proper pathway during the last years on getting to terms with a very difficult situation in economy and finances for the big utilities anyhow, and especially those who have nuclear heritage. And I worked on a study for the Ministry of Economy and Energy. We, as a law firm, we looked into all the legal aspects way in 2014-15, and out came a long discussion, and we do have now a modified act on continued liability for nuclear decommissioning and disposal act costs. That was an act which ensured to keep the money which was assembled, even though these companies started like Vattenfall to split into good and bad companies. And so we needed to act quickly because the German law has a timeline where you as a state can stop taking out of responsibility from the former mother via some changing of the company statutes. And we have the Commission zur Überprüfung der Finanzierung des Kernenergieausstiegs, the Commission for the Review of the Financing of the Nuclear Phase-Out, which was a real stakeholder. Yes, I have to stop. So what we do have, maybe I then would stop there. The 4 operators, RWE, E.ON, EnBW, and Vattenfall, will have to pay 70.4 billion euro into a state-administered fund to finance interim and final storage of nuclear waste. And they will pay an additional surcharge of 35.5% or 6.2 billion to cover the eventuality that costs could exceed current projections. So if you come back to that, there must be this flexibility. France seems nowadays already to know what will be in 100 years, cost-wise. And therefore, we now have this new law, which will come, which will then go into these things. So I don't go into France because we have, but again, maybe to conclude, it's very fine that we look into the decommissioning costs and that the Assemblée Nationale has done this great work. But somebody has to sum up all the state aid incurring. And if you look, and Fessenheim would be for me an excellent blueprint. And if you come back then to the internalization of externalities, I think it makes us quite speechless. And with that, I stop here. Thank you.